we are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Hold on, things are heating up fast. Have you noticed empty factories or pricier groceries in your town? As of 8 a.m. CES today, July 29, 2025, the U.S. has doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum imports to 50%, a move that's shaking communities. In Michigan, Sarah watches her husband lose his plant job, while canned goods jump 20% in cost. In Texas, John, a father of 3, says, "I voted for this, but my family's struggling." Over 120,000 U.S. workers are jobless in weeks, turning neighborhoods into ghost towns. The silence is haunting. In Pennsylvania, Mark, a laid-off welder, mutters, "I bought the tariff hype. Now I'm broke." Share your story below. We're diving into the real stakes. Stick with us, this gets wilder. Let's rewind. This storm didn't hit overnight. On February 2, 2025, President Trump, citing national security under Section 232 of the 1960 to Trade Expansion Act, reimposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada, effective March 12, after earlier threats of blanket tariffs were dodged. Canada, the U.S.'s top supplier, 50% of aluminum and 20% of steel imports, felt the pinch. RBC notes Canada's 2024 trade balance in these metals was $14 billion, with $11 billion from aluminum. Quebec and Ontario, where these industries hit 1% and 0.6% of GDP, braced for impact. Trump framed it as a jobs boost, but cracks showed fast. Alumina Corp warned in early 2025 of 25,000 direct jobs and 90,000 downstream roles at risk due to energy costs soaring to 10 to 14 cents per kilowatt-hour versus Canada's 4 cents from hydropower. The escalation began March 11th. Trump threatened a 50% tariff hike on Truth Social, sparking market chaos, only to back off after Ontario's Premier Doug Ford suspended a 25% electricity surcharge. By June 3rd, Trump signed an executive order, effective June 4th, locking in the 50% rate, aiming for 80% U.S. smelter capacity. Canada retaliated on March 13th with $29.8 billion in 25% counter tariffs on U.S. goods, steel, tools, computers, matching the $4 approach of 2018-19. PwC Canada highlights this could mean a combined 50% tariff on Canadian metal exports if stacked with other measures. Reuters reported aluminum prices hit $990 per ton, while the New York Times noted U.S. stock market whipsawed, with the S&P 500 dropping 9% from its February peak. Now, the fallout's real. U.S. smelters, running at 55% capacity in 2021 due to high energy costs, can't compete. Canada's Quebec, with 2.9 million tons exported to the U.S. in 2024, saw output rise 9.5% from January to June 2025, per industry data. Ontario's metal revenues soared 13%, fueled by cheap hydropower, 40% of production costs. Ottawa filed a WTO complaint, deepened EU and Asia ties, and launched a $4.5 billion net zero metal corridor. Per Canada.ca, global firms like Siemens and Toyota shifted orders north, with the North American Metal Trade Group warning the U.S. could lose aerospace and EV dominance by 2028. Meanwhile, U.S. job losses hit 120,000, echoing 2018's 75,000 loss estimate by economists Katie Ross and Lydia Cox. The human cost bites. In Indiana, a school principal says 40% of grads are leaving since June. In Quebec, Murray, a smelter supervisor, notes, U.S. tariffs handed us growth. A mid-2025 Pew survey shows 63% of U.S. industrial state residents see tariffs as harmful. Congress split. Senator Jane Harper, RTX, calls it sabotage without energy fixes, while Representative Tom Ellis, DIL, demands a grid plan. Alumina CFO reports a $120 million Q2 2025 tariff hit, with the Midwest aluminum premium jumping from 40 cents to 60 cents per pound, up 180% since late 2024. Can makers and car parts firms face 10 to 18% cost hikes? The Economic Policy Institute estimates a $55 billion industry loss, double the 25% tariff impact. Canada's playing chess, not checkers. Prime Minister Mark Carney, since taking office, vowed counter tariffs by September 2025 if talks fail, backed by a $4.8 billion exporter loan. On July 6th, Reuters revealed talks to support firms like Rio Tinto against the 50% tariff. Provinces like British Columbia IEV parts, while a July 2025 poll shows 88% of Canadians want less U.S. reliance. The New York Times reports Canada's capping non-U.S. steel at 2024 levels with 50% tariffs to block Chinese overflow, a move Catherine Cobden of the Canadian Steel Producers Association calls a big step. What's next? The U.S. grid, strained by AI and semiconductor demand, can't support new smelters without decades and $100 billion per Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy. Canada's Hydro Edge 12 new projects since 2020 could lock in 70% of North American aluminum by 2027. The IMF warns of a U.S. recession risk in 2025 due to trade uncertainty, while the OECD cites slower global growth from barriers. If the U.S. doesn't pivot with energy investment, Canada's clean metal hub status could solidify, per Wood Mackenzie. Trump's April 2nd threat of auto tariffs looms, potentially hiking car prices for $1,711, per economist Arthur Laffer. This isn't just trade, it's a power shift. From Quebec's humming plants to Ohio's silent lots, the stakes are high. Will the U.S. adapt with bold moves or fade as Canada rises? Tell us your thoughts below. Share if this hits home, and subscribe. Every update could change your future. Don't miss it. Hit play now to dig deeper. Consider this: U.S. aluminum imports from Canada dropped from 65% to 55% since May 2024, per trade data, while Canada's EU exports hit records. In Saguenay, workers weld for Germany, not the U.S. anymore. The Aluminum Association stresses tariff-free Canadian metal is vital for U.S. security. Meanwhile, U.S. consumers face a 20.6% average tariff rate, the highest since 1910, per the Yale Budget Lab, hitting wallets hard. Canada's $10 billion loan facility for large firms, announced June 19th, aims to stabilize markets, per Canada.ca. Experts like Dr. Helen Park from Toronto University warn, without infrastructure, U.S. tariffs are a losing bet. The build-up's been tense. March's market volatility saw steel prices spike, per The Guardian, as Ford and GM stocks dipped 4% and 1.3%. Canada's Trade Impact Program, via Export Development Canada, helps exporters pivot, while U.S. auto parts cross borders less, disrupting supply chains. The 2,000 to steel tariff preceding 220,000 jobs lost looms large, per the Peterson Institute. Today, 35,000 Quebec metal jobs contrast with 30,000 U.S. aluminum rolls, a gap widening fast. Looking ahead, negotiations by July 21, 2025, per Canada.ca, could ease tensions, but Trump's IEPA powers signal more tariffs. Canada's clean energy corridor could draw $20 billion in foreign investment by 2030, per industry forecasts. The U.S. risks a $200 billion GDP hit by 2026, per the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, unless it acts. This is a live story. Stay tuned, comment, and share. For the full picture, picture this: in Manitoba, Luke, an engineer, says, "We're hiring while U.S. towns empty. U.S. energy costs 2 to 3 times Canada's, per Industrious Labs, cripple smelters." Canada's 95% smelter capacity versus U.S. 55% tells the tale. Global buyers at the June Geneva summit praised Canada's stability. The U.S. could lose 10% of manufacturing jobs by 2028, per Fitch Ratings, if trends hold. This is your economy. Engage below, subscribe, and watch the next part.